I thought she was just another invisible, overweight cashier he could degrade for a quick laugh. But when Chicago's most ruthless Mafia boss insulted her in flawless Sicilian, he didn't expect her to smile, lean over the counter, and whisper the one secret that could get him killed. The bell above the heavy oak door of Dolce and Salato Imports chimed, cutting through the low hum of the refrigeration units. Outside, the harsh Chicago wind battered the storefront, but inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged prosciutto, sharp provolone, and freshly ground espresso. Behind the vintage brass cash register stood Beatrice Hayes. Beatrice was a fat woman, and she knew exactly how the world saw her. She didn't just carry a few extra pounds. She was undeniably, heavily fat, taking up physical space in a society that constantly demanded women shrink themselves. Her uniform apron was tied snugly around her wide waist, her thick arms resting comfortably on the marble counter. To the wealthy patrons of the Gold Coast neighborhood who frequented the shop for $50 bottles of olive oil, she was a fixture. She was part of the furniture, a sweet, slow-moving, invisible entity who bagged their groceries and handed back their change. They didn't look her in the eye. They didn't ask about her day. To them, her size made her devoid of a personal life, intellect, or consequence, and that was exactly how Beatrice wanted it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, when the atmosphere in the shop shifted violently. The door didn't just open, it was shoved inward by a broad-shouldered man in a tailored charcoal suit, followed closely by two others who scanned the aisles with the predatory precision of trained wolves. At the center of the trio was Dominic Russo. Anyone who read the Metro section of the Chicago Tribune, or caught the whispered rumors in the city's underground gambling dens, knew the Russo name. Dominic was the newly appointed underboss of the Russo Syndicate, taking the reins after his father's sudden retirement to a federal penitentiary. Dominic was 34, impeccably groomed, devastatingly handsome, and notoriously brutal. He carried himself with the unchecked arrogance of a man who owned the police precincts, the judges, and the streets. Dominic approached the deli counter, his expensive leather shoes clicking sharply against the terracotta tiles. He didn't bother to look at Beatrice. His eyes were fixed on the imported cigars behind the glass case. 2 boxes of the Cohibas, the pre-embargo stash Lorenzo keeps in the back, Dominic demanded, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He didn't ask, he commanded. Beatrice nodded politely, her expression entirely neutral. Of course, sir. Give me just a moment. Because of her size, her movements were methodical, lacking the frantic, nervous energy that Dominic was used to inspiring in civilians. She walked to the back room, retrieved the locked cedar boxes, and returned to the counter, setting them down gently. She began to ring up the exorbitant purchase, her pudgy fingers tapping the brass keys of the register. Dominic checked his platinum Rolex, clearly irritated by the passage of 30 seconds. He turned slightly to his right-hand man, a scarred enforcer named Leo, and scoffed. What Dominic didn't know, what no one in the city of Chicago knew, was that Beatrice's presence in this deli was not a matter of circumstance. Her invisibility was a meticulously crafted camouflage. Dominic leaned against the counter, looking Beatrice up and down with blatant disgust. He switched to a rapid, highly localized Sicilian dialect, confident that this thoroughly American, overweight cashier wouldn't understand a single syllable. "Guarda questa vacca," Dominic muttered to Leo, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Look at this cow. No wonder this place is always out of stock. She probably eats half the inventory before we even get here. God, it disgusts me. Move faster, Grassona. Leo let out a low, guttural laugh, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. You think she can even reach the register over that stomach, boss? Miracles happen every day, Leo, Dominic replied in Sicilian, rolling his eyes. Just pay the so we can get out of this depressing dump. Beatrice heard every single word. She didn't flush with embarrassment. Tears didn't prick the corners of her eyes. The deep-seated shame that Dominic was trying to inflict bounced right off her. Instead, a warm, dangerous thrill coiled in the pit of her stomach. She kept her eyes on the screen, slowly bagging the expensive cigars, ensuring the tissue paper was folded perfectly. She didn't speak Sicilian because she had studied it in college. She spoke it because, for the last 6 years, Beatrice Hayes had been the highest-paid forensic accountant in the American criminal underworld. To the FBI, she was a myth known only as the Ledger. To the 5 ruling families across the eastern seaboard, she was the ghost who laundered billions through a labyrinth of shell companies, real estate holdings, and offshore trusts. She was the one who balanced the books of murderers, extortionists, and drug lords. Her mind was a steel trap for numbers, routing codes, and fatal secrets. Working as a cashier at a Mafia-owned import store was her physical alibi when millions of dollars were moving through encrypted servers in her basement apartment. The feds saw only a lonely, overweight woman scanning barcodes for $14 an hour. Her fatness was her ultimate disguise. In a world dominated by hyper-masculine predators, an obese woman in a stained apron was the absolute last person they would ever suspect of holding their leashes. Beatrice finished bagging the items. She looked up, meeting Dominic's cold, dark eyes directly, and then she smiled. It wasn't the subservient, customer service smile he was expecting. It was a terrifyingly calm, knowing grin. "That will be $4,200, sir," Beatrice said in perfect, unaccented English. Dominic tossed a thick stack of $100 bills onto the counter, not bothering to count it. "Keep the change. Go buy yourself a salad." Leo snickered again. Beatrice picked up the money, her smile never wavering. She printed the receipt, but before handing it to him, she reached into her apron, pulled out a cheap blue ballpoint pen, and quickly scribbled a sequence of numbers on the back of the thermal paper. Dominic reached out to snatch the bag, but Beatrice didn't let go of the handles. She held on to the heavy paper with a grip that defied her soft appearance. For a second, a flicker of confusion crossed Dominic's face. He tugged, but she held firm. "What is your problem?" Dominic snapped, his English returning, laced with sudden, sharp venom. "Let go of the bag." Beatrice leaned forward, her chest pressing against the marble counter. When she spoke, her voice dropped an octave, and the words that flowed from her mouth were in flawless, street-perfect Sicilian. "I prefer sfogliatelle to salads, Dominic," she whispered, her accent so precise it sounded like she was born in the alleys of Palermo. "But you know what I don't prefer? Sloppy bookkeeping." Dominic froze. The color drained from his face with such violent speed that he looked physically ill. Behind him, Leo's hand instinctively twitched toward the bulge under his suit jacket, but Dominic shot out an arm, halting him. Beatrice slid the receipt across the counter, the blue ink facing upward. Dominic's eyes darted to the paper. Written in neat, looping handwriting was Cayman Holdings, 4.2 M, Macau. "What the hell is this?" Dominic hissed, the air in the deli suddenly feeling suffocatingly thin. That, Beatrice continued, slipping effortlessly back into English, is the routing sequence for a shell company called Redwood Holdings, a company you quietly set up 3 months ago to skim $4.2 million out of your own syndicate's union pension fund. You've been funneling it through a Cayman server to pay off that massive, humiliating baccarat debt you racked up to the triads in Macau. Dominic stared at her, his jaw locked, his breathing shallow. The arrogant Mafia prince was suddenly looking at a ghost. Only 3 people in the world knew about Redwood Holdings. 2 of them were his absolute most trusted lieutenants. "Who the fuck are you?" Dominic whispered, leaning in close, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and genuine terror. "If you're a Fed, you're a dead woman. I'll have you cut into so many pieces they won't find you for a decade." "Oh, Dominic," Beatrice sighed, shaking her head with mock sympathy. "If I were the FBI, you'd already be in zip ties. And insulting my weight? Truly unoriginal. You men always go for the low-hanging fruit." She let go of the bag and folded her arms over her chest, resting them comfortably on her stomach. "Your father, Lorenzo, trusted me to clean the union money," Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a conversational murmur, loud enough only for him to hear. "When he went away, he told me to keep an eye on his son. He said, 'Dominic is ruthless, but he's stupid with money.' I didn't want to believe him. But then 3 weeks ago, I watched 4 million vanish from the ledger. You stole from your own captains, Dominic. You stole from the blood money that pays the families of your soldiers." Dominic's hands gripped the edge of the marble counter so hard, his knuckles turned stark white. "You're the ledger," he breathed out, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. The mythical accountant who caught a boss in New York skimming and bankrupted him overnight with a few keystrokes, leaving him to the mercy of his furious underlings. Dominic had pictured a slick Wall Street rogue, a dark web hacker in a high-tech fortress. Not a fat cashier at his father's favorite cheese shop on Rush Street. "In the flesh," Beatrice said cheerfully, "all 280 pounds of me. Now here is how this is going to work." Leo took a step forward, his hand slipping inside his jacket. "Boss, give me the word. I'll put one in her head right now." "Shut up, Leo," Dominic barked, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew better. If this woman was who she claimed to be, killing her would be the equivalent of detonating a financial nuclear bomb on his own family. "Smart boy," Beatrice praised. "If my heart stops, a dead man's switch activates. The full ledger of your theft, complete with IP logs, digital signatures, and the Macau wire transfers, will be automatically emailed to every single one of your capos. Do you know what Carmine will do to you when he finds out you stole his pension money to play cards?" Dominic swallowed hard. Carmine was a butcher. He would flay Dominic alive, boss's son or not. "What do you want?" Dominic asked, his voice entirely stripped of its former bravado. The power dynamic in the room had completely flipped. The ruthless Mafia boss was entirely at the mercy of the woman he had just reduced to a punchline. "First," Beatrice said, leaning back and looking at him with mild disgust, "you are going to learn how to speak to people. Your arrogance is a liability. You're loud, you're sloppy, and frankly, your Sicilian grammar is atrocious." Dominic's jaw clenched, but he didn't dare speak. "Second," she continued, "you have exactly 48 hours to put the $4.2 million back into the union pension fund. I don't care how you do it. Sell your cars, liquidate your crypto, Rob a bank. I don't care. But if that account isn't balanced by Thursday at noon, I will burn your empire to the ground, and I won't even have to leave this cash register to do it." Dominic glared at her, pride fighting a losing battle against survival. "And if I pay it back?" "Then I fix the books, I make the gap disappear, and you get to live another day pretending you're the king of Chicago." Beatrice smiled, her eyes cold. "But you will forever know that the only reason you are breathing is because I allowed it. Understand?" Dominic stared at the chubby woman in the stained apron. He felt small. He felt completely, utterly outmatched. He grabbed the bag of cigars, his hands shaking slightly, and shoved the receipt into his pocket. "Understand?" Beatrice repeated, her tone hardening into a command that demanded absolute obedience. "I understand," Dominic choked out. "Good," Beatrice beamed, her friendly customer service mask sliding right back into place. "Thank you for shopping at Dolce & Salato. Have a wonderful afternoon, Mr. Russo." The penthouse suite of the St. Regis Chicago offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. But Dominic Russo wasn't looking at the water. He was pacing the length of his Persian rug, staring at the contact list on his encrypted phone, sweat staining the collar of his Tom Ford shirt. 48 hours. In the criminal underworld, time was a fluid concept, bent by bribes and threats. But Beatrice Hayes didn't operate on Mafia time. She operated on binary code and bank transfers. Dominic's first instinct had been violence. It was all he knew. Within an hour of leaving Dolce & Salato, he had dispatched his best digital cleaner, a paranoid ex-NSA contractor named Wyatt, to isolate the IP address Beatrice had leaked on the receipt and dismantle her dead man's switch. Wyatt had set up his rig in the back room of a Russo-owned nightclub in River North. It took him less than 20 minutes to breach the outer firewall of the server Beatrice had tauntingly left breadcrumbs for. But the moment Wyatt tried to execute a kill script on the routing sequence, his entire array of monitors went pitch black. A second later, the screens flared back to life, displaying a single line of text against a white background. "Tell Dominic that if he tries to peek under my skirt again, the timer drops to 24 hours. Simultaneously, Wyatt's offshore accounts at Cayman National Bank, his entire life savings, were drained to zero. The money was wired to a charitable foundation for retired police dogs in Zurich. Wyatt had called Dominic, hyperventilating, and promptly boarded a flight to Costa Rica, leaving the Russo syndicate completely blind in the digital space. Dominic realized then that Beatrice wasn't just a bookkeeper. She was an apex predator. By Wednesday afternoon, desperation had set in. Dominic liquidated everything he could touch without alerting the capos. He sold his shares in a legitimate real estate development in the West Loop at a 30% loss. He called in a massive, risky favor from Alderman Thomas Gallagher, extorting a quiet $2 million from a slush fund tied to the city's sanitation contracts. By midnight on Wednesday, he had scraped together $3.1 million. He was still over $1 million short. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Beatrice. He saw her with soft waist, the confident slope of her shoulders, and that terrifying, serene smile. In his world, women were ornaments, thin, fragile, heavily manicured things that nodded and looked pretty on his arm at charity galas. Beatrice was none of those things. She was massive, unbothered, and she held his beating heart in her pudgy, ink-stained fingers. And heaven help him, the sheer, unadulterated power she wielded was doing something twisted to his psyche. He was furious, yes. His pride was bleeding out on the floor. But beneath the humiliation was a dark, pulsing obsession. She had humiliated him effortlessly. She had stripped away his armor without raising her voice. By Thursday morning, with only 4 hours left until the noon deadline, Dominic knew he was out of options. He couldn't manifest another $1 million in clean cash without tipping off Carmine and the rest of the commission. If he ran, the ledger would go out, and the syndicate's hitmen would hunt him down before he reached the Canadian border. He had to face her. Dominic didn't bring Leo. He didn't bring his gun. He drove his sleek black Audi away from the Gold Coast, navigating the morning traffic toward the address his men had pulled from the Delhi's W-2 forms. It was a modest, pre-war brick apartment building in Lincoln Park. He walked up the 3 flights of stairs, the wood groaning under his weight. He stopped at apartment 3B and raised his fist to knock. Before his knuckles even touched the wood, the locks clicked open. The door swung inward. Beatrice stood in the entryway. She wasn't wearing the stained apron or the sensible orthopedic shoes of a cashier. She wore a dark emerald silk robe that cascaded over her heavy curves, tied loosely at her thick waist. Her dark hair was down, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Without the fluorescent lights of the deli washing her out, she looked startlingly regal. "You're an hour early, Dominic," she said, her voice smooth, sipping from a porcelain mug of black coffee. She didn't look surprised to see him. In fact, the door unlocking automatically meant she had been watching him on the building's security cameras since he pulled onto her street. "I don't have all of it," Dominic said, his voice raspy. He stood in the hallway, entirely stripped of his bravado. Beatrice took a slow sip of her coffee, her dark eyes scanning his face. She took in the dark circles under his eyes, the wrinkled designer suit, the absolute defeat radiating from his posture. "Come in," she ordered, stepping aside. Her apartment was not what he expected. There were no stacks of cash, no multi-monitor hacker setups bathed in neon light. It looked like the home of a wealthy academic. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with first-edition classics and thick volumes on macroeconomics. A vintage Persian rug covered the hardwood floor, and a single sleek laptop sat on an antique mahogany dining table. "I have 3.1 million, Dominic said, pacing into the center of the living room, unable to stand still. "I sold the West Loop properties. I leveraged Gallagher's slush fund. I'm tapped out, Beatrice. If I pull another wire transfer, Carmine's accountant will see the discrepancy. I can get you the rest by Monday, I swear to God." Beatrice walked over to the mahogany table and set her coffee mug down. She didn't sit. She simply leaned against the heavy wood, crossing her arms. The silk of her robe shifted, emphasizing her imposing, unshakable physical presence. "Monday is not the deadline, Dominic. Thursday at noon is the deadline. We discussed this. I am offering you 30% interest on the remaining balance," Dominic pleaded, taking a step toward her. The ruthless Mafia boss was begging. "I'll sign over the deeds to the Southside distribution warehouses. I will put them in a blind trust under your name. Just don't send that ledger." Beatrice tilted her head. "You're offering me the syndicate's territory. Your father would be ashamed." "My father is rotting in ADX Florence," Dominic snapped, his temper flaring for a fraction of a second before he caught himself, visibly shrinking back. "Please, Beatrice, you win. You proved your point. I'm an arrogant prick. I'm sloppy. But if you hit that button, the Russo family eats itself alive. Beatrice watched him in silence. The ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner of the room seemed to echo like gunshots in the tense air. Dominic took another step closer, entirely invading her personal space, but not with aggression, with submission. He looked down at her. She was shorter than him, but she felt 10 feet tall. "What do you want?" he whispered, the question much different than when he had asked it in the deli. This time, it wasn't a demand for terms, it was a surrender. "You want me on my knees? You want me to beg? I'll do it. Just tell me how I survive this." Beatrice's lips curved into a very faint, almost imperceptible smile. She turned her back to him, her wide hips brushing against the edge of the table as she opened the laptop. She typed in a password, 12 rapid keystrokes. "Look at the screen," she commanded softly. Dominic stepped up behind her, looking over her shoulder. The screen displayed the offshore Cayman routing interface. With one click of the mouse, Beatrice initiated a transfer. But it wasn't transferring the 3.1 million. Dominic had scraped together. It was transferring exactly $4.2 million. Dominic's breath hitched. Where did that come from?" "A ghost account in Geneva," Beatrice said casually, closing the laptop with a soft click. "The Union Pension Fund is whole again. Carmine's auditors won't find a single dime out of place." Dominic grabbed the back of a dining chair, dizzy with confusion. "You paid my debt? Why? You had me dead to rights. You could have owned everything." Beatrice turned around to face him. They were mere inches apart now. "I already own everything, Dominic," she said softly, her eyes locking onto his. "I control the blood supply of this entire city. I don't need your warehouses." What I needed to know was whether Lorenzo's son was a spoiled, gambling addict who would run to the feds when backed into a corner, or if he was a man who would bleed himself dry to fix his own mistakes. Dominic stared at her, the realization slowly dawning on him. "Your father," Beatrice continued, her voice dropping to a dark, velvet purr. "He knew about your Macau debt before he was indicted. He told me to lock the money down and let you hang yourself. He wanted to see how you handled the noose." "This was a test," Dominic breathed out, a mix of relief and utter awe washing over him. "You set me up." "I didn't steal the money, Dominic. You did," she reminded him sharply, poking a thick, manicured finger into his chest. "I just forced you to look in the mirror. You tore your own empire apart in 48 hours to protect the family from a war. You didn't run. You didn't rat. You came here to a woman you mocked for her weight, and you offered her your crown." She stepped closer, the scent of vanilla and expensive espresso wrapping around him. "You pass, Dominic." The humiliation Dominic had felt for the last 2 days evaporated, replaced by a searing, intense heat. He looked at this woman, this brilliant, dangerous, beautifully heavy woman who had played him like a cheap violin, and he felt something he had never felt for anyone in his life: absolute, unwavering devotion. Without thinking, Dominic raised his hand, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed the soft curve of her jawline. Beatrice didn't pull away. Her dark eyes stared into his, calculating and fearless. "You're a monster," Dominic whispered, his voice thick with a dark, twisting reverence. "I'm an accountant," Beatrice corrected smoothly, a wicked smirk returning to her lips. "And as of right now, you work for me. You get to sit at the head of the table. You get to give the orders to Leo and Carmine. You get to be the king of Chicago." She leaned in, her lips grazing his ear, sending a violent shiver down his spine. "But you and I both know who holds the ledger," she whispered. Dominic closed his eyes, inhaling her scent, his hands gripping her waist, feeling the soft, heavy curves that he had once insulted, now anchoring him to the earth. "I know," Dominic murmured, the Mafia boss fully surrendering to his queen. "I know." From a mocked cashier to the undisputed, invisible queen of the Chicago underworld. Beatrice didn't just break the Mafia boss. She remade him, proving that true power isn't about the size of your muscles, but the brilliance of your mind. Do you think Dominic will stay loyal, or is this dangerous romance destined for a deadly betrayal? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you loved this jaw-dropping Mafia twist, please like the video, share it with a friend who loves a badass heroine, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life romantic dramas.